Howdy and welcome to What the Bleep Does This Mean? My name is Bill McCamley, and on this podcast, we try to talk about a complicated something in the public sphere in 15 minutes or less, and hopefully some kind of language you can understand. Today, we're going to talk about moving fast and breaking things, the federal government edition. So, Donald Trump has recently given Elon Musk more power than any non-elected person in the recent history of the United States. And he has used it mercilessly through his DOGE effort, which is Department of Government Efficiency, to drastically reshape how Americans live. And before we go on, I want to be really careful and not say reshape government, because sometimes we think of government as some separate thing away from us, one that doesn't really do anything but take our taxes. That's not true, though, and that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. So, as everybody probably knows, Elon comes from the tech industry in Silicon Valley. And those folks have some mantras they love to use. The word disruptor is really popular and generally means, in the positive sense, a person who challenges the status quo and changes things in the industry. A CNBC article that I found showed their top 50 disruptors from 2022, and the picture was a huge armored knight bringing a sword down on his black box and shattering it like it was some hero. An even more interesting term comes from Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, who in 2012 wrote a letter to his investors where he said he needed to, quote, move fast and break things. He argues in that letter that slowing down change because people are afraid of mistakes is bad because you then sacrifice those changes that could have moved a company forward. And one of the most famous examples of moving fast and breaking things in the tech world was when Elon took over Twitter in October of 2022. He immediately sent a letter to all of his employees that said fork in the road. And in it, he said to all the workers there, you needed to be hardcore and work long hours at high intensity without an increase in pay. The result was that he lost, either through people quitting or being fired, about 80% of his employees. And that was intentional, as the purpose of Twitter as a business is to make money. And the less folks you have to pay, the more money you can keep to yourself. Well, what happened? Arguably some things that really help Twitter, like a community notes page, easier access to videos, making it more like TikTok, and adding an algorithm designed to keep you on Twitter, again, like TikTok and Facebook, which has increased their engagement. However, there are some things that didn't go so well. First, a ton of advertisers left Twitter after his takeover. So Elon started a thing called Twitter Blue, where anyone could spend $8 to buy an account. If you're on Twitter or X now, it's that blue check mark. But there was no actual verification. You just gave them $8. So people started impersonating other people and organizations. One of the more famous examples was that someone bought an account for Eli Lilly, which is a company that makes medical supplies. And their first post literally said, "We are excited to announce that insulin is free now," which was obviously fake. And while amusing, this actually caused Eli Lilly's stock to drop 6%. And other insulin makers took hits to their stock amounts as well. Second, content moderation is gone. Combined with that focus we just talked about on engagement, where according to the London School of Political Technology, controversial content drives engagement and extreme content drives extreme engagement, the amount of false information and angry, hateful comments has exploded. It's actually gotten so bad that the app was banned temporarily in Brazil and only reinstated after they paid a $5 million fee and blocked accounts that the government said was actually hurting their society by spreading misinformation. And even though Eli promised a war on bots, and these are fake accounts, not representing anybody in particular, but mostly made up accounts for either scams to get your money or political reasons, like Russia is famous for bot farms, where they pay programmers to set up these things to promote their ideology on Twitter and other social media accounts. But these things are still prevalent, even with Eli's promised war, with 20% of all posts responding to Eli's election-related tweets being fake bots. The third thing is it's actually barely breaking even, Twitter is, or it might actually be losing money depending on which articles you find, with some reports showing that it has lost 80% of its value. So in this case, moving fast and breaking things hasn't led to financial success yet, though it has given Elon his own private platform to influence how people think, which is probably why I bought it in the first place. Here's the real issue. If you move fast and break things for Twitter or with any other tech company, yeah, people could be fired and lies and hate can spread, which are really bad things, but the effect is limited. If you do this with government, which Elon is now specifically doing, people can really get hurt. For instance, and this is among the things that scares me the most, Elon recently fired 100 people from the National Nuclear Safety Administration, many from Los Alamos National Labs in my home state of New Mexico. If you've seen Oppenheimer, you know this is the town he created in the high desert to make all of our nukes during World War II, and they're still continuing to do so up there. The staff includes a guy named James Todd, whose title, and I shit you not, is Acting Chief of Defense Nuclear Safety. And that guy was temporarily fired and restricted access to his email. Like the name on his title describes, those folks are responsible for guarding our nation's nuclear weapons. Let me say this again. These people are responsible for guarding our nuclear fucking weapons, and they were fired. Now, while this was recognized fairly quickly and the people were asked to come back, a lot of them are now wondering how stable their jobs are. I mean, think about it. If you're fired and the stated goal of the dude in charge is to fire all the people around you, but then you're asked to come back, how long will it take you to maybe go back, brush off that resume, and look for another gig? For me, I will tell you it wouldn't be very long. And for the staff who are in charge of and are the best, most knowledgeable people guarding our nukes, if they start sniffing around for new jobs, that's really, really scary. Another example, something similar happened in the food industry. 2,000 people were recently axed from the US Department of Agriculture. This includes a ton of folks working to contain the recent bird flu epidemic. And these are veterinarians and field research and folks like that. Since this strain of bird flu started in 2022, 148 million birds have had to be killed because they got this virus. And last year, it started affecting dairy cows. And it is now in humans. There are 70 cases of bird flu that have been recorded in people, and one person has actually died from it, and there's probably more. So, firing all the people in charge of figuring out what is going on with this thing and working to contain it does a couple of things. Number one, if we don't contain it, prices go up. Egg prices rose so much that Waffle House, recently of all places, is actually charging an extra 50 cents per egg if you order anything with eggs in their restaurants. And bakeries can't find eggs to make the stuff that they rely on, like cakes and pies and things like that, and have had to raise prices. And yes, without their work, more animals and frankly, some more people could die. Another really shitty part of Elon's move fast and break things approach really, really screws and betrays veterans. First off, Elon has said he wants to fire 10% of the people in the federal government. That's 2.3 million workers total. But our agencies are the biggest single employer of veterans in the country, with 30% of those 2.3 million people being vets. Well, doing some simple math, and I know I went to New Mexico State school, but you can do that. 10% of 2.3 million is 230,000, and 30% of that is 69,000 vets that would lose their jobs under Elon if he's able to fire the people he wants to fire. Can you imagine being a person recently out of the army? You get a decent job doing something useful you believe in, and then you get fired for why? Because some Silicon Valley billionaire's crazy ideology and he wants a tax cut? That sucks. Second, the VA. So the Veterans Administration is personal for me. My dad got mental health services he really, really needed from them. And my sister is a doctor whose job is to take care of older vets. Well, she got Elon's first letter back in January asking her to quit. And this was the same fork in the road message that he did for Twitter. And I assume she recently got the one he sent out to all the federal employees asking them to justify 5 things they did over the last week, even though it didn't come from their supervisors. The whole goal seems to be getting people like her to quit. And let's face it, a lot of these folks take their jobs because they care about what they do. I know she does, but she can almost definitely make more money working in the private sector. So if they all quit, who takes care of all the old vets? The answer is who the hell knows? And it doesn't stop there. In the last 2 months, Elon fired 1,000 people from the VA straight up. These are researchers working on things like long-term health implications of burn pits and veteran suicide, which is super high. And they also fired administrative people that will make things like wait times for vets to get into a clinic or wait for their compensation claims. They'll go way up. And new clinics have been stopped and added beds to facilities have been cut for now. That's tough. Lastly, he's actually screwing over farmers, which is a bit crazy because rural farmers supported Trump and Elon hard in the last election. But Elon has frozen a ton of grants that were already allocated for small farmers across the country for things like cleaner irrigation equipment and solar panels, which these farmers already bought, expecting to get reimbursed for them. And though the new Secretary of Ag says these farmers will eventually get their money, they haven't yet. And if you fire all the workers in charge of making these programs happen, who the hell do we expect to do the work and get things like this moving? Look, there is zero doubt, zero, that the US government can and should be more efficient. But we also need to realize in our effort to make them more efficient a couple of things. First, the dudes who wrote the Constitution, we like to say we defend, set things up to be inefficient on purpose. Why? Because they had just spent years fighting against England, which was ruled by a king back in the 1700s. And the way countries under a king work, that dude, mostly dudes, makes a decision and people working for him are just supposed to do it. Boom. No discussions, no questions, no thought. Just say yes. But that sucked for the colonies that became the United States because they kind of said everybody here had to pay shitloads of taxes without any say in it. And it was so bad, we literally fought a massive 8-year-long war to get away from a king. And they wanted their new government to think about things. They wanted the people who, as we all know, disagree on stuff to have a say. That's why it takes so long generally to get a new law passed. Because if all you do is move fast and break things, people get hurt and sometimes die. And they don't even have an opportunity to make their voices heard in the rules and taxes that affect their lives. If you've ever seen the Schoolhouse Rocks cartoon, I'm Just a Bill on Capitol Hill, and on social media, I'll put a post on for it. You should. Because it does a great job explaining all the things that have to happen to pass a law. It is a huge pain in the ass. And I spent 6 years in a state legislature, so I can tell you how frustrating that is personally. But it hopefully means that when a bill is done and passed, it's been thought about and people have a shot at getting their input in. And these guys around wanted some things to be protected. That's why they set up a Bill of Rights. This is a document that guarantees everyone certain rights, like the right to free speech or to worship in any way you want to or not worship at all. This allows some random dude like a king in charge not to force you to go to church every Sunday and force you to go to what kind of church they want you to go to. It also set up a court system, our government. This is super inefficient. It takes time to get all the evidence a prosecutor and defense team needs, to pick a jury, and to have a trial. It is by definition inefficient. But what is the alternative? A king or a dictator says, yo, I don't like what you're doing, go to jail and stay there. That is very efficient, but that's not what this country is all about. One more thing on this. The United States has been built, and pretty successfully, on a system where the private sector does some things and makes money off them, but government does some really necessary things that doesn't make money, but are inefficient. Let's take the military. It's not efficient, famously so. But what's the alternative? We go out and hire a bunch of mercenaries to protect the country? Well, what happens if another country says, hey, we're going to pay you more than them and they go away? That's not good. And that's why we have a public Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. Or what about people with disabilities? Special education in school takes time. And to do it right, you need teachers specifically trained in how to help kids. It is super inefficient. But people aren't machines. And America has made the right choice to say we care about them and want to help them even when it's hard or takes time. Handicap parking spaces and chairs in stadiums are another example. They are the opposite of efficient. They take time and money to make, and people without disabilities have to walk further to get where they want to go. But when my old man, the 25-year Army veteran, was in his last years and in a wheelchair, I needed these things to get him around and doing things that other people could do. And it was the right thing. So as you hear more about waste and inefficiency, we should have a conversation about all this stuff. But let's remember that when government just moves fast and break things, that can have a real shitty consequences for the rest of us. Again, this is Bill McCamley. Thank you so much. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to ask on social media or email whatthebleepdoesthismean@gmail.com. Thanks, everybody, and good luck out there.